starting my recording thing there. And what we're going to do is just move that over to here. So in the webinar today, I've got you all muted at the moment, just because it tends to be a little bit loud sometimes when everyone's sort of talking. You get background noise and feedback and everything else. Over on the right-hand side, or over in the webinar control panel, you should see a little set of icons so you can see other people in the webinar, and a little raise hand icon. It's about in the middle of the control panel. If I could just get people to raise their hands now if they can hear me okay. Okay, I've got a few people raising, fantastic. Okay. Melanie, Joda, can you hear me okay? Did you have your hand raised? Fantastic, thank you very much for that. Okay, so it sounds like things are going through okay. There is also in that section over on the right a questions area. With you guys all muted, you obviously can't ask me questions verbally, but you can put questions into that questions area. I'll see them pop up and I'll answer those questions as best I can as we're going through. Okay, what we're going to do though is we're going to start off now quickly, and I just have one quick poll to send out to you. So I've just launched the poll over there, and I'm seeing we're getting some feedback on that. So the poll obviously said current usage of Storyline, and to give you the results, 78% of people have voted, and the results are in. So we've got about 30% never used, 30% used new user, 1 to 3. This is all changing for me. Okay, 100% of people have voted. So we've got 20, 20, 20, which is never used, new user and intermediate, and 40% advanced, which is 9+, which is cool. It's good to have a spread of people across these different areas. What we're looking at today, as was said on the title of the webinar, is some of the what you might call hidden functionality in Storyline. One of them is a relatively new item in Storyline, and that's the tab fields, which we'll talk about first of all. The next thing we're going to look at after that is our changing navigation by using multiple states of objects on the screen, which is something I quite like. It's a triggering thing. And then what we're also going to do is have a look finally at adaptive text using variables as well. So this sort of gives you, for new users, it'll give you an idea of some of the things that Storyline is capable of. For the advanced users, hopefully show you something that you've not seen before and give you some ideas. And for the intermediate users, same. Okay, so I'll close that poll down. That's enough of you. And what we're going to have a look at on the screen, first of all, is the data entry fields. And we're going to use that in correlation with the tab field, or the tab fields in Storyline. Okay, so what I've got, what you should see in front of you is my screen, which is my Storyline screen. I've got an untitled Storyline file up at the moment. For anyone that sort of joined slightly late, this is being recorded and you'll get the session sent out to you after the fact. So just in case anyone was wondering, you've missed vital and important information. You haven't. I've only been waffling up until now. But yeah, it will be recorded and sent out to you afterwards. So what we're looking at on the screen is a standard Storyline screen. I'm not going to bother with sort of renaming the scene titles or names. I'm just going to jump straight into my first slide on the screen. Now, when we're looking at tab order, which is the first thing we're going to be discussing, the tab order is where, you know, when you're filling out a form on a bank's interface or something like that, you can tab from one field to the next around the screen. So you can enter your first name, tab to the next field, and enter your surname. So we're going to look at a similar thing, in fact, exactly the same thing on this screen. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start off by inserting a character into my field, just because we like to have the characters in the fields or on the screen. And she will do. I'm going to turn her slightly to the right. I'm going to give her a talking expression, and that's fine. Okay. So character is going to be called Karen. Just rename her in the timeline there. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to make her a bit bigger on the screen. Okay, Olivia, he keeps on losing the sound. Yeah, I'm not sure. I'll just go a little bit slower. That can just be an internet connection thing because we are running over the net. So, like I said, Olivia, if you do sort of miss the sound on things, I will be sending out the recording, which is recording on my computer, so you get the full sound after that. So you might be getting the stilted approach now, but you'll get the full approach at least when I send out the recording at the end. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to crop into this character just to make her a bit bigger on the screen. And I'm going to insert a caption for her as well. Okay, and in the caption, it's going to say, please enter your first name and surname before you enter this course. Okay, please enter your first name and surname before we enter the course. I might do a little bit of formatting on that caption so that it looks a bit prettier. So I'm going to come up to my, with the caption selected, come up to my Format tab. I've got the pre-built formatting options up the top here, so I can change how that caption appears based on those format options. Okay, I also have my fill and other options as well. So if I wanted to go into and change to a specific set of formatting options as well, I can do that. One of the things, since we're talking about hidden features in Storyline, one of the things that I really love in Storyline now is this eyedropper function. So to step back here, I'm in my caption. I'm going to go to my shape fill area, which is in the Format tab. That gives me my other colors here. Now, normally I can go into the colors here, or I can go into more fill colors, which gives me the place where I can put in RGB codes and HTML color codes and so on and so forth. This has also got the dropper, but from the shape fill area here, I have this eyedropper option. When I click on that, you can see the little square appears on the screen and my cursor changes to an eyedropper. Now when I hover that cursor over parts of the screen, the little square picks up the color behind the eyedropper. So in effect, what I can do is I can go to any part of my screen. If I come down to the bottom here and go to Google Chrome, or there's the FileZilla logo down here at the bottom, I can hover over the FileZilla logo red. I can click on that option and automatically picks up that option and changes the color of my object to match that option. So anything else on your screen, you can pick up the color of that and you can bring that into the objects on your screen, which is another really cool little feature that not a lot of people know about. A lot of people sort of go, oh, wonder what that is, but they never really find out. Now you know, if you didn't already. So that was pretty cool. So we have our caption on the screen. We're going to put in now our data entry field. So what I'm going to do is just insert a shape in the background so that these fields will stand out a little bit. And we'll just go with a rounded rectangle here. It's going to come into the screen. I might make it even more round. Okay. And then we can format that as well. Make it slightly bluer. Then what we're going to look at is inserting our text boxes. What I'll do quickly before I do that is I'll just name these items on the screen. So I'm going to come down to my timeline at the bottom here. For my caption, I'm going to have character caption as the name, and for my rectangle, I'm going to call that background rectangle. Naming these objects in the timeline is going to become very important for us later on, particularly when we're looking at the tab fields. Okay, so we have our character, we have our caption and our rectangle, which will back up behind the data entry fields. To put in a data entry field, that's pretty straightforward. We go up to the Insert tab, across to our Controls area, and we're going to put in the data entry field. That's in Controls there. Down the bottom, there's two different types of data entry field that we can use. There's a text data entry field, and there's a numeric data entry field. For people that haven't used these before, just a bit of a quick thing behind those. The main difference here between the two, obviously one's number and one's text, but the number data entry field only accepts numbers and nothing else, punctuation or letters it doesn't like. The text data entry field accepts everything, numbers, punctuation, symbols, letters, the whole lot. It's a name data entry field that we're using in this instance anyway, so I'm going to be using the text data entry field. So I'm going to select text data entry, click into the screen. That gives me my data entry field on the screen. Now I'm going to do a number of things with that. I'm going to first of all make the field a bit bigger. I'm going to type into the field first name. I'm going to change its name in the timeline also to first name entry. And then I can do some formatting with that as well. So I can click on it, change its font, change the font size, center that. Okay, so there's my first name field set up on the screen. What I'm going to do now is put in my surname field. So I'm going to insert another data entry field. So insert, controls, data entry. Okay, make this a bit bigger as well. Put in the surname in there. And where do we have that one? 28. Do the formatting and change the name in the timeline over here. So we have that set up. So we have our first name data entry field, we have our surname data entry field. Okay, so to have a way look at the way these work, if I just preview this slide, okay, so we have our slide here. We have first name. I'm going to have to change the formatting of that field so the name doesn't sort of pop out like that. But we have our first name. When I click into that field, it gives me my cursor, and I can type into the field directly. Surname, I can also type into that field directly as well. You notice with these data entry fields, one quick point is that when I put in more characters than the field can display, it automatically puts in a scroll for me. So if you don't want to see that, and it's probably a little bit objectionable to see that scroll come up, you want to make the size of the field big enough so that it can capture as many characters as you would find in a sort of standard, in this case, surname. So I might want to make mine a bit bigger. I'm not going to bother with that in this instance just because it's a demonstration, but it gives you a very good view here as to what's happening. If you exceed the size of the field, it puts in this scroll and then people can't see what they started typing, which can be slightly problematic. So obviously got here two fields where I can enter information. Where does that information go? Okay, so I'm just going to move this little thing over here. The information goes into variables in the background. Okay, so the information itself, once you enter the first name and the surname, gets stored in a data field in the background. That data field is called a variable. The variables are controlled just up over here above our trigger area. We can see that we've got two text entry variables in there. Text entry 1. That will be my first name. That will be my surname. We've added the 1. It's the second one I added. What I want to do, just to make things clear for myself, is change the name of these items. So I'm going to call that first name variable, first name var. And I'll change this one. You can either change them by clicking into the field or double clicking like I did before. surname var. So I've got two variables now which hold that information for me in the background, the first name and the surname. Okay, so I entered the details in the fields. These variables, which are data packets in the background, or data containers in the background, I should say, not packets, but containers, hold that information, and then they allow me to output that information somewhere down the track. And we'll do that side of the exercise now before we come back and look at the tab fields in this screen. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a new slide, which will just be a blank slide. So we have our new slide over here. I'm going to copy my character down here, and I'm going to copy her caption down as well. Okay. In the caption, so what I'm going to do is on this screen, enter my first name and surname. On this screen, I'm going to output, sorry, on this screen here, I'm going to output that first name and surname in a sentence structure. Okay. Now the way we output off the back of a data entry variable is very simple. I'm going to highlight the text there and just start typing, and I'm going to type in the word hi, and then space. And then to reference my first name variable, I need to go to the Insert tab. On the Insert tab over next to the text box, there is a reference option. When I click on that reference option, it shows me my variables panel and all the variables inside there. So I want to reference that first name variable into that space. Put my cursor after that, hit space. So it's going to say, now, hi, whatever I enter in my first name field. Actually, I put a comma there. Welcome to the course. Would you like me to call you, and we'll reference again, first name again, or do you prefer space, and now I'm going to reference my surname. In fact, I'm going to put in there Mr. Okay, so I've got my two variables referenced. I'll just make this box a bit bigger so we can see those a bit better. So hi, first name, which is slightly presumptive given the rest of the text box. Welcome to the course. Would you like me to call you first name, or do you prefer Mr. surname variable? So what should happen now is if I preview the scene, which is both slides together, I can enter my first name here and my surname. By entering them in this field, it saves them into the variable. When I hit next, it says, hi Ben, welcome to the course. Would you like me to call you Ben, or do you prefer Mr. Saunders? So it's referenced both of those fields, held them in the background, and allows me to output them onto any other slide in my piece of content. So that's a little bit there about the data entry fields. We can see the data entry fields working. But the actual exercise here is to look at the tab order. And the tab order is where you've got different fields, and I'm just going to fix up the formatting on that thing, these ones, so that they don't go a bit crazy when I preview them. So we're going to make that a bit smaller. Just preview that slide to make sure it looks okay. Much better. Okay. So with the tab order in here, what that allows you to do is to tab from one slide to the other. Now the tab's already there, but if I preview the slide, okay, if I click into that field, type in my name and hit tab, you can see it tabs around the screen and then highlights the different elements that are on the screen. And in that instance, I started here, but then I went up to the caption, across to the person, into the rectangle, down to the caption again, and then down to my surname. So it's taking me a long way around to get from one to the other. But what we can do now as a relatively new function in Storyline 2 is to be able to adjust that tab order. And the way we do that is in the Home tab here. We have just next to the new slide option, a tab order option, okay? In that tab order option, if I click on that, it opens up the slide and it shows me the different elements that are on that slide. Okay, it's got my caption, it's got my character, it's got my background rectangle, it's got my first name, and it's got my surname. So if I wanted to limit the tab just to first name, surname, what I can do is select these other options, use the delete at the bottom here, that will take those out of the tab, and then I'll just be left with the first name and the surname. So if I'm first name, it tabs to surname, surname to first name, and that's all. One of the other things you should notice with the tab order screen is that it brings up the alternate text option. Now, the alternate text option is one of the accessibility features in Storyline. This is the alternate text is text that gets picked up by a screen reader to say that, a character has entered the screen, or you're looking at a picture of a tractor, or whatever it happens to be. So it's picked up for someone that's visually impaired, picks up the text and gives them an auditory version of what's going on the screen. In the past, in Storyline, in order to get that alternate text, you would have to go to each element on the screen and put in the text individually. With the tab function, you can go in and put that alternate text directly next to each item over here, put the description in on the screen over here if you need that, okay? Which is quite cool because it lists everything on the screen. You can just go and put all your alternate text in. But aside from that, what we're going to do is just get this tab order right. So what we have is all the items on the screen. What I'm going to do is click on these items and get rid of the items that I don't want to tab to. So I'm just left with my first name data entry and my surname data entry. Once I've got those, I click save. Okay, so that tab order is just those two items now. Click save. Now let's see what happens when I preview the slide. Type in my first name, tab, and it takes me into the second one. Okay, so it hasn't taken me all the way around the screen. It's just taken me from one field to the next. So that's one of the new functions in Storyline, which is quite cool, I think. I can hit next. Oh, that's because I've only previewed the slide and not the entire scene. Okay, so I close that. Preview the scene. Okay, first name, surname, goes from one to the next. Okay, so instead of taking me on a tour around the screen, it's gone from one field to the next, much more simply. And on top of that, you get that alternate text option as well, which allows you to put in alternate text behind the different objects behind the screen. Okay, so we'll close out of that preview. The next thing that we were going to look at in this demonstration was using multiple states of items on the screen to allow us to control navigation. So what I'm going to do is create another new slide underneath this one. It'll just be a blank slide. And we're going to grab our character and our caption again. Okay. And what I'm going to do is just say in this, click on all of the buttons on the screen before you move on. Okay, so what we're going to do with this particular slide is we're going to say, okay, in order to get out of the slide, I must have clicked on all of the buttons on the screen. Now, this is a multi-step process, but it's really actually quite good to know that you can do this very simply. So what I'm going to do is I'll also actually create another new slide to go to as well. And this is just going to have a text box saying, great work. You clicked on everything. Okay. We're just going to have a blank slide there. In this screen, what we're going to do is put in those multiple buttons on the screen so that we can have something to click on. So I'm just going to come into my Insert tab, across to my controls and select a button. That's going to be called button 1. Okay, and it's called button 1 in the timeline as well. That's handy. What I'm going to do then is I'm going to duplicate this button a number of times. Okay, so there's a number of ways you can duplicate a button. For people that have been using Storyline for a while, you probably know you can cut, copy and paste, or Control D for duplicate. Something that not everyone knows about the button sets or objects in Storyline is you can also use the Control Shift key on your keyboard to transfer those buttons and keep them in alignment. So if I copy and paste, which I'll do with my keyboard here, actually I'll do it on the screen so you can see it. If I copy and then paste that button, you can see that it copies and pastes the button, and it does it in a slightly offset way. So then I have to grab the button and sort of drag it down underneath to get the alignment right. If, however, I'll delete that, go back up to this button here and click on it, then hold down my Shift and Control keys on my keyboard, move up to the edge of the button, and you can see the cursor changes to the little plus sign and the square. When I see that, I can click and drag the button down, then release the mouse and release Control and Shift, and it's copied the button exactly, but it's also kept it in perfect alignment. Once again, that's holding down the Control and Shift keys on your keyboard. You can click and drag that button down and keep it in alignment. Then what I need to do is just rename the button on the screen. It's already called button 2 down here, which is a bit handy. And I'm going to do that for a couple more turns. So there's now be button 3. And one more time. Button 4. Okay. So we have all of our buttons on the screen. One thing also, when you're dealing with buttons and you're sort of stretching them out vertically, one of the good things that I've found to use, and not everyone, again, it's a sort of common function, not everyone knows about it though, is to get all these at the same or an equidistant area apart, so you want to be an equal distance apart. What I can do is select all of those buttons. So just hold down the Shift key, click on each one of the buttons. In the Home tab, come across to Arrange. In the Arrange area, go down to the Alignment area, and then Distribute Vertically. Okay, and then it gives them an equal distribution between the top and the bottom item of the items you've selected. So it's a very quick way to copy them down, distribute vertically, and you get your buttons all the same distance apart. Okay, now the purpose of the exercise, if I preview my entire scene again, is to put in my first name, put in my surname, hit next. That takes me into this screen. Hit next, takes me into my button screen. Now what I want from this button screen is to not be able to hit next again until I've clicked on each one of those buttons. Okay, so at the moment if I click next, it just takes me straight through, which I don't want. I want it to be so I have to click on each one of these buttons so that I can't move on until I've done that. Now the way to set that up, one of the new features, or another one of the new features in Storyline 2 is the ability to change the state of the next button, which is the button when we preview the slide, is the button down the bottom here. Okay, the next button down there. That allows us to move forward and backwards through our content. To do that, what I can do is put in a new trigger. That trigger is going to change the state of. The thing that we're changing the state of, you can see here, it's been included, the next and the previous button are new. So we can change the state of the next button. The state that I want to change it to, I can have one of 3 states on those buttons. Normal, which is how it is at the moment. Hidden, so it'll just disappear off the screen, or disabled. I'm going to have it there so it's disabled, but I just won't be able to click on it. Okay, so change the state of the next button to the disabled state when the timeline starts on my slide. And I click OK. If I preview my slide now, okay, so you can see the next button down here is being grayed out and I can't click on it. I can
and click on the previous button, you can see my cursor changes over there, but the next button has been disabled. So effectively what I've done is I've stopped the user from using that next button, which is all fine and dandy, but now I need to be able to turn the next button back on so that they can move on to the next element. And in this instance, the way that we're going to do that is by clicking on each one of these buttons on the screen. Now, the thing that's going to help me with that is that each one of these buttons, if I click on a button and come down to my states area here, have certain inbuilt states. Okay, and there's certain states that are recognized by the system, not just for buttons, but for markers and other things as well. And for a button at least, the states are the normal state, the state when you hover over the button, the down states when you actually click on it, looks like you're clicking the button down, the visited state, which means you've been there, or a disabled state, which means the button's been turned off. So what we can do with these is say, I'm only going to let the user go to the next screen once all of these buttons have got their visited state displaying. Now, to make that slightly more obvious, what I'm going to do also in here is edit the states so that the visited state for these buttons is much more prominent. So I'm going to do it with button 1 first and then copy that across the other buttons. To edit the states of a button, we're going to hit the edit states option here. Then we're going to format that button and give it a new state, which I'll just make it a, ooh, I've done something wrong there, ignore that. What I forgot to do is when I hit edit states there, I forgot to select the state that I wanted to edit, which seems like a rookie mistake, but we all make those every now and then. So what you need to do is hit edit states, then click on the state that you want to edit. You would have noticed when I did that originally, I was on the normal state, it changed the state of everything. So anything you do over on this one changes everything else. If I just select visited state here and then give that the yellow-orange treatment, then it only changes that particular state. Once you've got that there, you can click Done Editing States. Okay, so at the moment, button 1 has got that orange state as visited, but button 2, 3, and 4 don't. And just to give you an idea of what that looks like, when we preview the slide, hit button 1, changes over to its visited state. That same state doesn't exist on these ones yet, but we can change that very quickly. So I have button 1 with its visited state, but not the others. Now I could just go through a manual process of selecting button 2, edit states, change the state over here, same with button 3 and button 4. What you can do with these sort of button sets though is use the format painter, which is up in your home tab here, to copy and paste the formats across the other elements of your button. So once you've set up one button with all of its states, you can select that button, so it has the solid line around it, click on the format painter, click on the next button, and you'll see that now button 2 automatically has that visited state as well. If you want to do multiple buttons at once, double click the format painter, which leaves it on, then I can click on button 3, that's got that one, and then button 4. So very quickly, we've given all of those different buttons the visited state. If you have double clicked the format painter, you need to click it one more time to turn it off as well. Okay, so we have now our buttons all with their visited state that's visually obvious. I can go back now and create my trigger that will turn the next button back on. So if you recall, we have a trigger over here that says change the state of the next button to disabled when the timeline starts. Now I want to have a trigger that turns the next button back on when all of these are visited. And that's very straightforward. We're going to open up a trigger. We're going to change the state of our next button back to the normal state. And this is going to be when. Now in the when here, we could do things like when the timeline ends or when the timeline reaches or whatever. The one that we're going to focus on is the state option here. When another event occurs, and that event is a state change. Okay, so as soon as we select that state option, it says, okay, what objects are going to have that state and what is the state going to be? Okay, and you can also say all or any or none of the objects. So you can select none of these objects have the visited state, then the next button's turned on. Or all of the objects have the visited state, then the next button's turned on. So I'm going to say all of the objects, and the objects that I want to have the state are the buttons 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. So the trigger so far is to change the state of the next button back to normal when the state of all 1, 2, 3, 4 buttons are, I click on the state option here and I want to go to the visited state. Okay, but you can see from that drop down, you can also have character states. So if you're using one of the illustrated characters, you can have it when the character changes their state to alarmed or angry or asking or confused, when you've dragged and dropped different elements, when things are hovered over, click down, visited, disabled, hidden, or selected. So there's a whole lot of different options. In this case, we're just going with visited. So the whole trigger again, change the state of the next button to normal when the state of all 4 of those buttons is equal to visited. Okay? Click OK. And there's that trigger there. Now, if I preview the whole scene, I have my first name, last name entry. I hit next there. That's great. I hit next again. Now my next button has been disabled. Okay, but what I need to do is click on each one of these buttons. Nothing's happened yet. Nothing's happened yet. Nothing's happened yet. As soon as I click on this one, the next button should turn back on again. And it has done. All of those are now visited. So now the next button gets turned back on again. It's a very simple way of controlling that navigation. When you want someone to stay on a particular slide and click on all of the things, and that could be not just buttons, it could be hotspots or markers or shapes or pictures. You get them to click or interact with those elements, dragging and dropping things around, moving them. Then the next button comes back on once they've done everything they need to do on screen. Okay, I can click next, and it takes me into the last screen there. Okay. So the last little exercise that we're going to go through in our webinar today is about adaptive text on the screen. And this is going to be adaptive text based on the entry field again. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to create another new slide down the bottom here. Okay, and in this slide, we're going to insert a character again. Someone else this time. They can still have the talking expression, that's fine. Okay, and we're going to insert caption. Okay, and we're going to say in here, going to buy an ice cream. I will get you one, two. How many would you like? Okay, so we're going to insert our caption there. Going to go and buy an ice cream. How many would you like? What we're going to do in here is insert our numeric entry field. So insert a numeric entry field down here. Okay, and we'll format that field. So that'll be our number. And then we're going to put in our variable name as well. That's going to become the ice creams variable. Okay, so, oops, sorry. Renamed the wrong one there. So I want my number entry variable here. Okay, so I have my number variable, ice cream variable. Okay, and then I have my OK over here. Okay, so what's going to happen in here is it's going to allow the user to insert a number into that field. Then on the next screen, which we'll create in a second, we can then reference that variable out into that screen. Okay, so I'll do that quickly. What I'll do to do that is, because in effect the screen is pretty much the same, so I'm going to just insert a new blank slide, come back to this screen, grab my character and my caption, move these across, and then we're going to say, okay, great, I will get you, and then we're going to insert our reference. Okay, there's my ice cream variable. Now, when we're looking at adaptive text, that's just referencing the variable for my numbers. And I can, after that, type in ice cream bracket S, whatever. Okay, so that covers the fact that I might have one ice cream or I might have multiple ice creams, depending on how hungry I am at the time. Okay, and we can test that out and see how that works. So if I just preview that slide or the scene, okay, welcome to that. Okay, got my buttons to go through. That worked. Put in my number, 3 ice creams. Okay, great, I'll get you 3 ice creams. Okay, but in order to do this in an adaptive way, what we can actually do is create a variable that can be either, in this case, the word cream or the word creams without the brackets around. And then based on the number entered in the numeric variable, we can change that display to equal a certain element. Okay, so what we're going to do in this instance is we are going to create our own variable. So we're going to open up the variables panel. We're going to create a new variable. The name of the variable will be creams. It's going to be a text variable, and the value is going to be blank. Okay, so a text variable, value blank, click on OK. Now what I'm going to do is, instead of having the word creams there, I'm going to reference that variable. So I'm going to insert reference creams variable into that position. Okay, so I have now a way of saying, okay, great, I'll get you a certain number of ice cream or creams. What I need to do now is have a way of changing this second variable, so it says either cream or creams, based on the number that I entered on the previous screen. So what I can do is I can come back to this previous screen where we had the number variable entered. I can add a trigger to this screen, and that's going to say adjust the variable. The variable that we're adjusting is going to be creams. We're going to assign the value cream when the user clicks the next button, and then we're going to add a condition. And the condition is going to be that my ice cream variable, which is my number, is equal to the value 1. So if I enter the value 1 and hit next, it'll change that creams variable to cream. And then it should output that on the next screen. Okay. What I'm going to do also in my triggers panel is move that trigger up so that it happens first. With the triggers, if you're not aware of this already, the triggers occur in the order in which they appear from top to bottom. So that trigger happens first, then the next one, and then the next one. So putting up that first means that it'll happen before any of the other triggers occur. What I need to do now is also set up another trigger to do the other thing. Okay, so adjust the variable creams to assign the value creams when the user clicks the next button on condition that ice cream is greater than or equal to the value 2. So if it's 2 or greater, it'll change that to creams. Click OK, and then fingers crossed, we'll preview the scene and we'll see what happens. Okay, go through our button set, hit next, that worked. Put in a number 1, hit next, and it said, okay, great, I'll get you 1 ice cream. If I replay the scene, put in that and my surname, hit next, next. I'm going to be greedy this time and I'll see if I can get 5 ice creams out of my friend. Ooh, hasn't come up with my second one. What's happening there? Let's see. If we go down, what I haven't done this time around, which is one of the things I did in the first instance, is I haven't yet moved my creams trigger up so that it happens before this. So remember what I said with the triggers. It goes with the first trigger and then does that, then looks at the second one, then looks at the third, looks at the fourth. In this instance, it's looked at the first one, then looked at the second one, which takes me to the next slide, which it's done. And so it's never actually seen this last trigger here. So I have to grab that trigger and move it up and then preview the scene again. Cool. That one, button, 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 button. I'll try and get my 5 ice creams again. And this time it's worked because I've moved that trigger up. Okay. So that basically takes us through the exercises I wanted to show you in today's webinar. Does anyone have any questions on what we've seen? You can enter those in the questions panel over on the right-hand side. If there are no questions, that's perfectly fine. I'll let you guys get on with your days. This whole session has been recorded and you will all get an email after the session which contains the recording of the session. So you can play that back. If you do have any questions that come up from this session, then feel free to contact me independently. My email is pretty straightforward. It's just ben@beonlinelearning.com.au. Aside from that, I'd like to thank you all for attending today and hope you enjoy the rest of your day and hope to speak to you in the near future on another episode. Actually, no, we've got another one. Oh, no, sorry. Thank you. Thanks, Andrea, for posting that up there. So, yep. Okay, so if everyone can leave now and we'll send out the links and like I said, hopefully hear from you again in the future. Thanks, everyone.